those of you who have never joined one of our webinars before, the goal of these webinars is to really get as much knowledge and information out to landowners and property owners that typically are not going out to your side of the equation. So we typically bring in very, very knowledgeable land professionals. Today we have Danielle Davenport, which those of you who are calling in nearby where the topic of discussion of today is taking place, down around the Valley of California, we have what I consider to be one of the top land professionals in the business for that particular area, and that's Danielle. And she's going to be giving you her 2 cents and some, what she's seeing there, what she, a kind of a timeline of why we're talking about this. But, just a few housekeeping things before we get going. This webinar is being recorded. So for those of you that are in the area, feel free to, you'll be receiving this recording in an email. Feel free to share those with your friends, your loved ones, whoever they are, anybody who might be interested in the topic. For those of you across the United States right now listening, Danielle's going to have a few things to talk about. That this is a topic of discussion that's happening across the United States. It's not just happening in California, and she's going to touch on that. But again, this is going to be recorded, so feel free to share it. This is a very open forum, so at any time, please, and I see some folks have already submitted some questions. If you have questions, please email those in to Michaela. That is at mb@landgate.com. Go ahead and email those in, and we will do our best to go ahead and get those answered live with Danielle here. But I don't want to spend too much time. Kind of the format of this webinar, I'm going to show you a few tools of how anybody listening, Danielle uses this tool, but anybody listening can subscribe to this tool and actually identify every piece of property that not just Flannery, but any group, any owner that you want to identify across the United States. You can find those properties very, very quickly and keep track of them and do what we're about to do, is find out a lot of information about them. Big disclaimer, we are not associated with the Flannery Group, their investment, any of their investors in any way, shape, or form. We are a tech company. We are just for those of you who are not familiar, we are a open marketplace for land and natural resources, and we're also a data analytics platform that provides information to folks just like you. So that is who we are in a nutshell. But I'm going to, like I said, we have Danielle here with us, and Danielle really is the land expert here, has done enormous amounts of transactions in and around this specific area. And in my opinion, is not a realtor. She has elevated herself above that to really a land expert and a land professional. For those of you in and around this area, or even similar types of areas across the United States, if you have follow-up questions or you need some services, some representation, whatever it is, Danielle is absolutely your person. It doesn't matter if you're outside of Dallas, if you're outside of the Front Range of Colorado, any areas where there's a lot of rural and vacant land acquisitions taking place. Wherever you're at, it's very, very likely that you're dealing with a scenario similar to this, maybe not the scale, but something similar. So Danielle, welcome to the webinar. I'm looking forward to what you have to say, but to kick things off right away here, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show everyone how this whole idea kind of came about. I read a news article, pinged an idea off of Danielle, and she said, "Well, can we unmask? Can we find out where these properties are?" I said, "Yeah, let's actually do that very quick." So this is a live demonstration. This is from our Power Realty tool on landgate.com. This is the only sales pitch I will do, and I have to because I'm the co-founder and president of the company, so I can feel compelled I have to. This tool is $16 a month, and you can do this same search across the United States. But here's what we did very, very quickly. Here's my platform. I'm looking at all of the United States here. What I did is I came down to my parcel search module here in Landgate. I typed in the state I wanted to search in. So I typed in California. I had read a news article that said Flannery and Associates was the group that was buying all of this property. So I typed in Flannery Associates here, in my search bar. And the next thing all I had to do is just click search. And what it's doing is searching through every single parcel in the state of California. And it found us very quickly, just a few seconds, found us every parcel that the Flannery and Associates had purchased. Okay. So once I have that, there's all kinds of information. I'm sure there's some folks that want to know exactly what have they been purchasing. All I did was go ahead and I viewed those parcels. I clicked add them to a portfolio, and there we are. Here is my portfolio of Flannery and Company. So very quickly, I don't know if you were timing me, but that was probably less than 10 seconds. As long as I knew who the group was, the association was, the landowner, it doesn't matter if you're wanting to find every property for Target or Starbucks, whatever your purpose is, you can go ahead and find that stuff very quickly. And obviously here, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the owners so that I can see not only, yes, here's the Flannery and Associates parcels. I can see everything that they purchased. But if I'm a landowner or I'm a land professional in and around this area, I can also see who's right next door, who's lined up next to start and I'm sure everyone in this area has been receiving offers and phone calls. But here's a very strategic way for land professionals or landowners to really be educated about what's been going on where. And since Danielle is a land professional, not just a realtor, when she's looking at this types of thing, or folks like me are looking at this on a map, I want to know, well, that's great. I can see the land position of where their footprint is, but I want to know also kind of what have they been buying as far as what type of land. It's primarily been farmland, it's been some pasture land, but what I can do in this tool, which is really, really cool, I can find out exactly how much land they've been purchasing and what type of land. So if I click on this land portion here, it's going to break down exactly how many acres of cropland they've purchased, which comes to about 19,500. I can see how much developed acres they've acquired. It's about 800. Pasture land, they've acquired about 21,700 acres of pasture land. Now, I want people to, as I'm going through this, I want people to understand, I've been reading articles for the last 6 months about this group. And I've been reading the same regurgitated information that everybody else has. This took us less than 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And I have not seen anything this granular to break down what exactly have they purchased, right? So this breaks everything down very, very easily, very quickly. And that's why land professionals like Daniel see such value in it. But as we were looking through this yesterday, Danielle and I, we sat down and we looked at this yesterday. And something that really jumped out that virtually nobody has been discussing, no one's been talking about, is solar energy. So when we look at this, and I'm going to look at this electrical infrastructure tied and associated with these exact parcels, you can see their outline, but these red lines are essentially arteries for our energy infrastructure grid. That's where we get electrons. You can see that there's some major transmission lines crisscrossing the Flannery properties, some big substations. And what a lot of people haven't noticed is there is an enormous amount of wind turbines in the southern part of the property, or their asset, if you will. One upside we saw was if they're planning on doing some of the things that they've said they want to do, they're going to need to develop a lot of solar energy. So very quickly, me and Danielle looked through this. I turned on exclusion zones specifically for solar energy, and we can easily identify where their next move essentially has to be to build out solar. This red area, not very good for solar, mostly hills, which is why wind turbines are there. But up here, using this software, we identified the top 15 or 20 high value parcels for them for solar, and it's all up here. So if I'm a landowner, again, if I'm looking at this information, either as a land professional or a landowner, these folks through this area should really have their ears up in the air that not only is it a play for land, but it's likely an energy play as well. So with no further ado, what we're going to do is kick it over to Danielle now. Again, like I said, she is really, really qualified to answer questions, provide services for you. But Danielle, again, thanks for joining the webinar. I'm looking forward to this. Is going to be a fun one. Why are we talking about the Flannery Group in the first place? Why is this a topic of discussion?
So thank you for having me. I want to dovetail quickly about the tool. And some of the benefits of using this tool in this analysis was that we could look at and get an understanding of what those price points are for those parcels. And I can go out and I can contact each of those parcel owners or landowners and really tell them that what their land is valued at. We also did an analysis to see what they sold for and what they should have sold for based on the different time frame of when these sold. So it's a great tool for having a baseline understanding of value and then having that ability to talk to these clients and customers and landowners about how they should be marketing their land or what they should expect for it. But going back to your question, why are we talking about this? Very interesting. This has been going on for 5 years. So since 2018, subtly a mysterious group with no identifiable corporate officers or investors has been purchasing land. And about 3 years ago, one of the local farmers contacted the mayor and mentioned, hey, someone's buying up all this land. So one of the things that was really scary about this is it's surrounding Travis Air Force Base, which is a critical air base in our area. And you can see it up there near yellow there.
Yeah, right, so they're we're looking at it, right? And they're right off, they're right. And looking at this, they're directly offsetting it, right?
It's 75% around the perimeter of Travis Air Force Base. So you can imagine everyone's hackles were getting up. They thought, is it the Chinese? Who's buying this? Why are they being so secretive? So the scuttlebutt was just building and building and building. And we know with the air base there, you cannot operate large infrastructure, homes. You cannot come up against their fence line. It's protected area. Basically, they purchased 400 parcels, about 55,000 acres, totaling $800 million. This just came to head in August, this month. Well, wait, no, I lost a month. Last month, there was complete secrecy to avoid land price speculation. They originally only purchased 400 acres and they paid under 5,000. So you can imagine as they were flying under the radar, they were bare boning it and really just undercutting the owners. As time went on and people got more wind of it, the price rose to about 20,000 per acre. So if these individuals were working with the land specialist, we know that we could have helped them to figure out what their land truly is worth. And now also, is there even more value to these other parcels that haven't been acquired yet because of the solar capacity and potential, not just farmland, right? We need to understand that. But as you can imagine, these 5 years, there's tension, there's just tons of drama, there's groups that are being formed, everyone's trying to investigate. So the tension and the lawsuit started forming around 2022. Landowner claims of bullying and using legal tactics against these reluctant sellers to acquire these family lands was starting to form. Flannery, that now we know who it is, we didn't know at the time, had filed a lawsuit in 2023 against several families for price collusion. So their goal was to ultimately start a legal battle with them so that they run out of funds because all of their money goes to their attorneys and then they could have acquired the land. So you could just see that this was a very contentious situation. I don't know why they did it this way. And I have some opinions about that, but in about August, the lawmakers and legal officials and everybody else decided that they were going to do an investigative search on this and really figure out what is going on here. In that process, the group had to come forward and show who they were, show their hand. Given that the speculation and buildup over 5 years, just really, really scared a lot of people. I think put a lot of people in the mindset of, we really need to understand who's buying our land. We need to get more intentional about understanding trends and trajectories and mass aggregators. And there's, and I'm going to back up a little bit. There is a lot of legislation that's out there, and there's a lot of stopgap measures that will help the government, the US Treasury, others identify when foreign investors are buying land. Now, this didn't happen to be foreign investors. I'm going to talk about who this actually is, but there's a lot of issues that are need to be addressed now. And I was just brainstorming with Craig about this, that there's something in 1978, it's called the Agricultural Foreign Investor Disclosure Act. And that was something that was developed so that anyone that's a foreign investor or foreign entity had to disclose through a particular form through the FSA, it's called the 153 form, that it was a foreign investor buying critical farmland. Now, that started out all well and good, but then we had streamlining of employees at the USDA. They just can't manage it. There's no way to ensure that people are filing these forms. So the concept is great. The application and the implementation falls short. There have been fines. There have been, they've gone out and identified certain parties that have been very belligerent in terms of their acquisitions, but there's a lot of people flying under the radar. And I think there's a huge opportunity for us as land professionals to also partner with our government and to even say, hey, I've identified a huge swath of parcels that are being bought up by foreign investors. Do you have these registered? And if not, we can be those advocates. And I think, and this is something I feel really strongly about because it's a national security risk. And that's why this Discovery Act was created, because as you can imagine, if foreigners buy up all of our critical farmland and we go to war, there's a conflict, they can cut off our food supply. We're SOL, we're done for. So that is a huge issue. It's really something we need to be thinking about. The other thing is the speculation around the Travis Air Force Base. That was another huge issue. So there is, I believe the US Treasury monitors that and makes sure that there's nobody purchasing land around any critical bases. There was something, I believe it was in, gosh, I want to say North or South Dakota. And
Yep.
And they were buying up some farmland around an Air Force base, and the local supervisors in Congress got involved, and they had to stop that one. They thought it was actually a Chinese entity, and they were going to build, I think, a corn silo or something like that, and they actually stopped it. So
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it brings in the rest of the nation, right? We're talking specifically about this very large, very well-funded, highly notarized type group here, but this is happening across the United States. I was just teaching a course last week, Danielle, where an individual, a land professional from North Dakota, was asking, "Can I find all of Bill Gates's properties using this tool?" So we researched Red River Trust from North Dakota, and we identified every single one of these properties within a few seconds, right? Same thing we did here. And I think that's a very strong role for land professionals like yourself to interact and expand your business to not just individuals, but you really are the professionals of who's buying what, where's it at, what's going on in areas like this. So when, let's say, let me just pull somebody random off of the map here. Let's go ahead. So Alex Cook Ranch gives you a call and says, "Hey, Danielle, what's going on? We have, a 640 there, which 640 acres. We've got a section here. We no longer have this neighbor down here to the southwest. We no longer, our friend up further north also sold to the same group. What is going on?" And it doesn't matter if it's, again, the disclaimer, we are not associated with it. Any of the folks from this one, we are not associated with Bill Gates, any of those folks. they're probably not too happy about this topic of discussion, and not for nefarious reasons, in my opinion. But if you're trying to build a large land position, whether you're a private individual or you're an energy company or anybody or a foreign entity, you don't really want people to know what you're doing, right? And this is a really good way to keep track of that.
Yeah, and you know, California is a disclosure state, so we know what people paid and who bought it and all of that detail. One of the other things I just want to bring up that just I'm a data gal, but Chinese businesses and affiliated entities own more than 300,000 acres in the US. And so again, we just really need to, I think we need to be advocates and as land professionals for understanding what our natural resources are being used for, and land being number one. So with that being said, farmland foreign buyers, lawmakers in more than 24 states have passed or considered legislation restricting Chinese purchases of U.S. farmland. There are several bills right now in the California Senate that will not go through because Newsom actually vetoed the last one. But we keep trying because California is a huge farmland state. States that have a law prohibiting foreign investment of critical farmland, and maybe you know this or maybe you don't, is Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, South Carolina. If your state wasn't on that list, I recommend you start working with some senators and legislators to see how you can get something on the books. And now I'm not a huge advocate, but I do think it's something we do need to monitor. But there's also some states with the most foreign-owned agricultural acreage. And this surprised me because I would have thought Texas would have had this on the books and would have prohibited foreign investment. But Texas has 5.3 million acres owned by foreign entities. They're the number one. Maine has 3.6, and that's a small state.
Tiny state. It's a significant percentage of that state is owned.
If you think about it, I would just say Maine is probably foreign owned. Colorado is 1.9, Alabama 1.8, and Oklahoma 1.7. So I'm giving you the buildup, right? And some of this information, maybe the public didn't know this, or they had some inkling that this was happening, but not to the order of magnitude that it really was. So you can imagine for the last 5 years of this Flannery and associates, their secrecy just caught, I think, has created so much bad blood because of the speculation, not the reality. And so I think they're going to have to pay for that. But anyway.
So that's a great point. So Danielle, in your opinion, you're land professional, this is what you do every day is buy and sell land. Are you suggesting that it would have been better, and any group listening or who's going to see this, is it better to just come right out and say, hey, here's what we are, we're planning on building this not futuristic city, but a more traditional type city setting, to just come out and say that and divulge that, rather than, like you said, having mass speculation that this is an act of war almost, right? Because people are just going to speculate the worst. So are you suggesting that it's just better to come out and kind of say who they are?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, they ended up overpaying for a lot of the parcels anyway, which was their goal, was to try and not get prices to go up. But I think that ultimately, when you make a bad impression, to change that impression is like 7 times harder than making a good first impression right off the bat. So I think now they're stuck with trying to fix that bad impression. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. So let me talk about this group. They were forced through the Air Force had the foreign investment risk review. And they went through and analyzed who was buying land around this Air Force base. California State Senate's Agricultural Committee held hearings on potential threats and heard testimony on these land acquisitions. And all of this, and John Garamendi and Mike Thompson, local congressmen, got involved in just the last few months. And they forced Flannery's hand to divulge who they were. So given that, who the heck are these people and why? So on August 22nd, Flannery Associates had to divulge who they are. And they are a bunch of tech billionaires that have decided that they want to create, in theory, a utopian city, a mega city east of Fairfield, which is a Delta city in Northern California. And the community is supposed to be with tens of thousands of residents, clean energy, public transportation, and dense urban life, and all these amazing things. Okay, so why? That feels a bit altruistic, maybe socialistic in nature, whatever. But I don't know why you wouldn't have at least tipped your hand in terms of that. And especially that the majority of these people, I believe, 11 out of the 12 major investors are American. So, you know, I don't understand their strategy, but again, they did that, caused great strife and issues with the community. But the interesting thing is back in 1982, a San Francisco real estate developer, Hiram Wu, announced plans to establish something he called Manzanita, a new city of 5,000 residents in the same exact area. I don't know why. I don't know why this area. A lot of it's in a lower flood zone. It's agricultural. It's kind of landlocked with the Delta, and it's a little bit tricky to get to.
Right, you can see that, yeah, and you can see as far as landlocked nature goes, all of this crosshatch, that's floodplain, unbuildable. So it is a bit isolated. It's a peninsula, if you will, right? It's a long peninsula, and that's where, and even the southern part down here where it's all red, it's not very hilly, but it's hilly where it's going to make it difficult for certain types of development to take place, which is why it's not great and ideal for solar energy.
Right. It's interesting. I mean, maybe because it is kind of an island, right? And people feel like they could be set apart from everybody else. I don't know, but I thought that was quite interesting when I dug a little bit deeper. But in this whole process, when that original developer back in 1982 created the community came together and created an orderly growth committee and restricted development within the city limits of the county. And really said that that's going to be in effect until 2028. Now, you know, current today's time, we have the master plan for that area, and that master plan does not allow for incorporation outside of the city or the urban growth boundary. There's many restrictions to building. California is the worst. And I should know this, we have something like 76 local serving agencies that have a say in whether you build or not. So it's very, very complicated. And if you want to build, let's say, a development, even if it's in the right zoning, in the right neighborhood, has the infrastructure, sometimes it has to go to vote. If it has any low income element, if it doesn't meet complete, you know, guidelines or standards, if it's high density like this, it has to go to a vote. And as we know, everyone's, you know, NIMBY, not in my backyard. They're all pro growth, but nobody wants it in their own town. So this would never happen from a organic voting perspective. And I say organic because I don't know what sort of money that this group is willing to put behind paying for votes.
So that's one of the last articles that I wrote prepping for this, is that essentially it's going to come down what voters approve here. So what if I'm in and around this area, and I'm not for or against, I'm completely neutral in this, but just for sake of the argument, what are the people of Fairfield, like you said, just to the northwest of where all this farm ground is located in most of their parcels, are these people going to be the ones that kind of decide what happens out here? And if so, they say this is not going to happen. What happens with the $800 million of parcels that are sitting there?
You know, I don't know. This is what is so interesting to me. These got to be really intelligent people, right, that are doing this. They have to have something up their sleeve that I just don't know about. I've worked with so many major developers and builders. And right now I know my partner and I just had a conversation with another builder in Livermore, which isn't far from here. And they've been in a 10-year option period because a local newspaper has been against them putting a new development in there. It's zoned for it. They have approvals from the city and the planning, but this newspaper tends to rally around no growth in their area. So for 10 years, they've been trying to build there. So let me back up a little bit. So this is a huge effort that would need to be placed, a land use change on the ballot. This is county land. It's zoned agricultural. We have an entity called LAFCO. And LAFCO is called Local Agency Formation Commission. And every area in California has all of their leaders in that particular area join onto LAFCO. And LAFCO decides where the boundaries are going to be for any future growth and expansion. They're the final say, and they are impossible to work with, because that's their guidelines, right? Their guidelines are discourage urban sprawl, preservation of open space and ag land, and land resources, the efficient provision of government services, and encouragement of orderly growth and boundaries. So that's one of our local serving agencies, 1 out of 76. I don't even know what the critical habitat looks like in this area.
There's been a couple of questions so far. To this point, Danielle, several questions have came in. Is this something that's even realistic? Right? Is this something that all of the things you just mentioned, all of the regulations and protocols and approvals, this is an enormous project. Is this, and before you answer that one, a question that I have on the top of my head, just looking at this is not cored up acreage. And when I mean cored up, this is not all contiguous. You have some contiguous acreage and some blocks, but there's a significant amount of land in and between this. Number one question, are they going to have to fill all of this in to achieve their ultimate goals, which means they still have a lot of buying left to do? Question one. And then secondly, is that even something realistic? If they core this whole thing up, are they going to be able to get through those hurdles? So
great question. I just have to think that they're not stupid. And they know something I don't know. So I keep saying to people, they have something up their sleeve. I don't know what it is. They spent $800 million already to acquire this land. What's another 5 million or 10 million on ballot campaigning? I don't know. The other thing is, we talked about this, and yeah, they're not contiguous, but the assets and the energy source that they can get from some of those areas that aren't contiguous, or, in those chunks, and then maybe develop in one other area, that one. Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking that's where the housing would be. The rest is where they would be driving their energy sources and infrastructure services. So maybe they don't need to be contiguous. I don't know. We talked about this, that they may be operating behind the meter too.
That's right. So what that means, Danielle says behind the meter, you see, and I said these transmission lines, these are arteries for our energy grid, where whatever your laptop or phone is plugged into, its electrons are coming from this grid system. A project of this scale, someone could, and you can see there's the estimated solar rent, and this is data that we provide across the United States. They're obviously very successful, very intelligent people that have as much data as they can when they make an acquisition. This is something that if you turn this on, these dark colored areas, now these are calculated and engineered values for potential solar energy rent payments. You're seeing here that just off of our calculation, if things go sideways for them, they have hedged their investments significantly, because this is an extraordinarily valuable renewable energy area where at a minimum, you're looking at probably, based on our calculations, $1,200 per acre per year. These are 30-year leases. So even if they made the acquisition, Danielle, at slightly higher prices, since they knew that this is a very good area, they likely had access to data and information that prior to Landgate, nobody else did, because they're very successful and very tech savvy. This data shows us very quickly by just looking at the heat map, well, there's another play to be had here outside of if they can't get all of this to be encompassed into a new city, they have a really, really good potential to generate significant revenue for themselves and their other investors just simply with a solar energy play.
Right. I think it's interesting because even if they were to build, there's no city services out there. There's no public works. I mean, it's a 2-lane highway. The infrastructure is not there. The city, and in order to get the city to allow a developer to build, you have to have that infrastructure earmarked to go in that direction, right? At least it's got to be on their plans. It's not even on their plans. So we're speculating that maybe they might do something like the casinos on the tribal lands are doing, right? Those aren't interconnected to any city services. Those are completely independently operated. They might be in an interconnection queue for the power, but most likely they have their own water company and their own sewer company. So maybe they'll do something like that and be off the grid. I just don't know. The other thing that I was thinking about, and this came to me yesterday when I was looking through this, is California has passed so much legislation right now to help expedite building and make processes ministerial and get out of like these log jams of, planning meetings and this and that. So we have something called SB 330, AB something or other, and SB 6 and whatever. I can't keep track of them. We keep passing these laws that allow, one of them's even nicknamed the builder remedy. It's the SB 330 that takes away significant authorities from cities and counties, reducing their review and approval powers over developments that shape their communities. So that was just passed last year. And we have builders right now that are pulling that trigger. Maybe Flannery and Associates has a legal team that might be lobbying to get some new legislation pushed through similar to that. Who knows? Because I don't see annexation into the city. I don't see any of that. It's going to have to be something completely separate and off the grid. And that would be an interesting thing to watch. I just don't know enough to be dangerous on this. I've got to think that you're right. They have all the money in the world and they're intelligent people. So they've got to have something else. And so I've been speculating as to what it would be. New legislation, paying for votes, I don't know. But it's just extremely an interesting use case for Landgate and just for us as land professionals in general to understand and to maybe represent, citizens in our respective areas.
That's a really good point. So I'm going to assume we're just going to zoom into one of these areas that's not cored up, right? They're basically surrounded by what has already been purchased. But let's say Christine Mahoney, that you're talking, I'm Christine Mahoney, and I'm sitting here, and maybe I'm listening to this, maybe this recording gets back to me somehow. What would you as a land professional, with everything all of the stuff you know about natural resources, the tools you have, what would you tell Christine Mahoney? What would you tell me right now? Because I'm sitting here watching this, maybe I'm kind of nervous. I'm basically surrounded. What powers do I have? Am I going to have to sell? Am I not going to have to sell? What would you tell me?
Well, it all comes down to her goals, right? Is it time, money, effort? What is it? And is she willing to stick around? If she's not, then that's a different conversation. And that conversation really goes to understanding the environmental assets, the value of them, the value of that land, short and long term, and then using every single variable to get the highest and best price for them. Because I have no problems raking these guys over the coals for more money.
You are a fighter, that is for sure, Danielle. So I'm really glad to have you on. And again, for any side of the aisle listening, we don't have a dog in the fight. We host the webinars, we have the data. But I think it brings up a really
But
good
wait,
point.
Craig,
Yeah, yeah.
If Flannery wanted to offload these, I would represent them.
So that's what I was going to say. And I think there's another side of the coin there, especially for land professionals, what you said earlier. It likely would have gone a little bit easier for them if they would have just came out and said, hey, we would really like to build this really cool community. We don't want to put, skyscrapers all over. We want to go actually backwards from what some of these local folks might be not happy with a overall societal narrative that is being pushed on them. And maybe, hey, we're going to take it back a step and we're going to take this, and this thing's going to look like a community from 1960. Okay, that's a different type of psychology of approaching landowners. There's a role to be played, I think, for land professionals at that phase, because you went through the phases, right? In 1982, there was an individual who had an idea and it didn't take off. And now going back 5 years ago, they did basically a purchase takeoff to buy up whatever they could, where you as a land professional, and I'm sure they probably used some realtors and folks like that and some brokers in the area. But coming at it from an angle that you mentioned of, hey, let's look at this holistically, show them what they're doing. And you could actually, as a land professional, you could work for them as well, representing, because it's just either are you representing the buyer or you're representing the seller. And again, we're really focused on Flannery here in California, but I would guarantee this is happening outside of every major urban area in the United States. Maybe not to this level, but I would absolutely be willing to bet that this is happening outside of Scottsdale, outside of Denver, Colorado Springs, Nashville, you name it. It's happening across the country. And what purpose do you see working on the buyer side, not just the seller side? What kind of opportunities would you see there?
Well, in this situation, I mean, it looks like emotion really took over in terms of what they paid for some of these. But again, if you're just trying to buy up land at any price, I mean, there's no advice you can give these people, but they did definitely overpay. Looking at using Landgate, because Landgate does give you, based on the heat map, the price per acreage of valuable solar, wind, etc. What I did was I looked at 5 different parcels and looked at what Landgate estimated the price to be. And they are all around, let's just say, average 550 acres. And Landgate estimated, let's just say, about 8,000 for the sale of 550 acres. These guys paid anywhere from 8 million. These guys paid anywhere from 20 million to 3 million. They were all over the map. So kind of interesting that they paid way over and then paid way under. So there was no rhyme or reason. The only thing I can speculate is that they underpaid when they first started the process and they were being quite stealth. And then as people got wind, they had to start paying more.
And I think I think that's probably common in most, from my side of the world that I come from on the energy side, that's certainly the case across the United States. The folks who hold out the longest are likely going to be the ones, in most cases, not always, but usually the ones that end up with the best deal.
Yeah. And I do think that, hindsight's 2020, of course, but if they would have laid out a master plan and went to these landowners and said, hey, your land is, here's a broker price opinion and it's worth this, we're going to pay you all 50% more than what it's worth, but we want to put in this community that is going to do, I'm making it up, I don't know, farming, have goats and everything else, I don't know. Maybe it could have gone much different. I don't know. Because these are the salt of the earth kind of people that farm their land, have walnut orchards, make a little bit of extra income from some wind turbines. They're not, millionaires, but all they know is farming the land and ranching it.
Yeah, and I think that makes a very good point is, we're all somewhat experts of what our subject matter is, right? What is land and real estate. If you had to get injected into a financial market, probably not going to be you're probably not going to be too strong there. These folks, they've been farming and ranching, and there's nobody knows more about land conservation, farming, ranching, soil health. Nobody knows anything more about that than these folks do. But it makes a very good point of folks like yourself, land professionals exist for when there's other aspects about this land, unless someone's coming in and they can promise the world, right? They can come in and say, yeah, Danielle, I want to come buy your 640 acres and I want to farm it too. I never farmed before in my life, but I want to start farming it. That should kind of raise some red flags to anyone that, this is probably not the purpose, not what they're buying the property for. But unless you have the data, right? Unless we've been talking quite a bit about solar energy here. Unless you have the data to show you, again, looking at solar energy, very high value area, but it's driven almost completely. Where can you build solar panels as far as buildable acres? Where do you have infrastructure that will support it? Unless you have either someone helping you that has exposed to that information, or you have the information yourself, it's really difficult to make educated decisions. And it's, at the end of the day, they're somewhat of a guess.
Yep. And Landgate has, for me, and of course, this is a Landgate driven webinar. So of course I'm going to plug you guys, but
you don't have to. That's not the purpose, but yeah,
well,
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
You plugged me.
Yeah.
So I just think that the data is invaluable. Now, is it gonna land with all of your buyers and sellers, and do they need to know all of this? No, maybe not. But I think it gives you more of a holistic picture, like you said, Craig, and understanding above ground, underground, vertical, horizontal, whatever could be used for that land, and the highest and best use.
Certainly. So we're at just about 50 minutes here. We've gone through, again, you went through the background of what's going on here with Flannery. You kind of explained what's going on now. What's your vision of how this thing keeps going, right? It's completely exposed now. Everyone knows the plan and what's there. They even have a public website that I think they've done very well with. What do you envision? What's your crystal ball saying? What's going to happen here over the next 5 to 10 years? What do you think?
It's kind of interesting because the mayor of Miss Moy, she and the local legislators have pretty much said they're building a plan of defense. They don't want that. They do not want this to happen. So
and that is the mayor of Fairfield, for the folks that may not be sitting. There might be somebody sitting in Florida. That's the mayor of the nearest large municipality, right, Danielle?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And also the U.S. Treasury, I believe that monitors land being purchased around the military base, is also forming essentially a moat around anything building within a certain perimeter of that area. So there's some heavy hitters that are coming forward that just saying, nope, we're having a plan that we're gonna lock this up. They can buy all they want, but we're not going to let anything happen. It's just the poor infrastructure, the regular droughts in the area, high risk for wildfires. I mean, for me, because of the high risk of wildfires, doesn't look like a heck of a lot of ways for someone to get out. It is kind of like an island.
Yeah, that is true. And you know the layout far more than I, right? I mean, if you let's just look at the roads here, and right there you have kind of the highway running through here, and this is really the only way in and out is this point here and point here. Is that right? Am I looking at that correctly?
And if you scroll down to the southwest a little bit, you'll see Benicia, and this is where all of our oil tankers come in over to the left in that waterway. So we've had mass oil spills and issues and fires over in this area.
Where do you want me to go?
Is you keep going to the left a little bit. So that's
right here.
Yeah, that's Benicia there. And that's just an interesting area from an oil tanker perspective too. So I don't know. I mean, there's just it's just an interesting area. I think that they have a long road ahead, but again, I'm scratching my head. They got to be smart, intelligent people with a lot of money. That they must have something up their sleeve that I don't know about.
Well, I hope that, and there was a couple questions of, how altruistic is this? And I think that comes down to everybody's opinion of, when it's a for-profit investment, and it doesn't matter who it is. I think there's always a question there. If you're labeling something as an altruistic thing, then you might want to be looking through a couple other layers of information here. But we're getting close to time, Danielle. What else would you like, for the folks, regardless of where they're sitting, right? Maybe there's landowners right off of this highway right now that are going to hear this. What do they need to know? Somebody sitting outside of Dallas, Colorado Springs, Denver, wherever it is, what do these folks need to know, and what would you tell them before we leave?
To be honest, I've seen all too many times that the landowner gets pushed out. They try to hold out, and it to really to their demise. And I think their quality of life diminishes and everything else. I mean, there's some big players in this world, and they tend to drive where things are happening. I say, let's help you hold out for the highest amount you can get, and then go build yourself a beautiful place somewhere else where you can buy some more time, because it really looks like this area, I do not know what they have planned for it. But even if they put in more infrastructure for solar and wind and everything else, it's just not going to be the land that you're used to.
I think that's really good feedback for everybody listening. This is feedback from a land professional that has been spent the vast majority of her career, which has been very lucrative and successful. I didn't mention all the awards and accreditations you have, Danielle, but I don't think there's anybody that I would recommend giving advice to as far as landowners than Danielle in this area. She's very, very good. Danielle Davenport, you can find her. She's an agent for Keller. She's a land professional for Keller Williams. D3 Land Group is Danielle's organization. Reach out to her. We're going to put her contact information when we reach out to everybody here. You'll get a recording of this webinar. And as always, if you need any resources, Landgate is here to work with you. We also have land professionals just like Danielle. Danielle, thank you so much for your time today. Very informative, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.